What is up, Bills Mafia? As you can see, I am not David Foxy. He is not here today. I am hosting today. It's the first time I've ever hosted, so bear with me as I ramble through a bunch of nonsense. But instead of doing the show solo, I brought in a Cover One cohort in Joe DeRosa. Joe, how you doing?
I am great. Thank you so much for having me. I am also not David Foxy.
This is true. This is true. Yeah. So today we're going to break down the Bills Raiders game. Awesome win. Obviously, a very different kind of feeling this week than we had last week. We're going to try to do it fairly quickly. I know we have a football game starting here in 15 minutes at 7:15. A wonderful Panthers Saints game that I'm sure everyone wants to watch.
Mm.
And then at 8:15, I think is the Browns Steelers, which actually is the game I'll be tuning into. But before we go into all this stuff, just have to talk about one of our sponsors, Underdog Fantasy Sports. Cover One is excited to once again partner with the most dynamic name in fantasy football, Underdog Fantasy. Did you get to draft Josh Allen in your home league? Use Underdog Fantasy's Pick'em contest, and you can win money predicting if Josh Allen will go over his yard total, touchdowns, completions, and more. If you think Allen to Diggs will blow up this week, which why wouldn't it? It blows up every week. You can put them both in your Pick'em. Predict up to 5 different over-unders correctly to win 20 times your money. Use promo code COVER1 when signing up to make your first deposit, and Underdog will match that deposit up to $100. That's $100 in free play if you use promo code COVER1. Sign up today and start winning. It's free money, essentially. It's a free
Yeah.
$100. That's pretty awesome.
Oh, yeah.
Um, yeah, so actually, Joe and I were talking before we even started the show and went live about the just difference in probably national reporting this week, and how last week it was just chaos. It was the Bills are awful. Josh Allen's done. All these players suck. We knew the Bills weren't going to win their division, blah, 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 etc. And now we're looking at a week where people are going to have to talk positively about the Bills. And when you win a game 28 by 28 points, you have to talk positively about them. What did you think overall about the game, Joe? Like, what was your takeaway from it?
Well, the vibes are definitely back. That's one. It felt really nice to not only see a Bills win, but to see a Bills blowout win. I think this fan base, after the first game, rightfully so, had a bit of pessimism. I remember seeing a poll that was performed where it was like 31% of the fan base believes in the direction of the team, which is insanity to ask that question after 1 week, but even more insane to lose all hope after week one. I was a huge critiquer of Josh Allen, of really the whole offense that game. But you see this week two matchup, you see the Bills go out there, it's ugly to start, and then they just put together a complete game where the rushing defense was dominant, pass defense, despite Devontae Adams having some success, was very productive. And the offense, man, I mean, Josh Allen had one of the most efficient games of his career, one of the best completion percentages, if not the best. Just an absolute masterful tactical performance by him and the rest of the offense. I mean, I could say with confidence after watching it back, it just left a lot of optimism for future games. So I'm definitely pleased.
Yeah, and I think there's no real better place to start than Josh Allen, especially coming off a game against the Jets where he had 4 turnovers. He just frankly, he looked awful. Like, I left that game just saying, what the hell is going on with him? Like, why make these boneheaded mistakes? And we saw a lot of those boneheaded mistakes last year as well. We saw them in the Dolphins playoff game. We saw them basically throughout the whole entire maybe second half of the season. Here and there, Josh would just make these silly mistakes. And it kind of came to a head, I think, with the fan base in that week one game where it's just, Josh, don't do that. Why are you throwing into triple coverage? Why are
Yep.
you running straight into somebody and just fumbling the ball? He essentially fumbled the game away. And now you come to this week, and one of the things that I was really interested in is what was his level of patience going to be, especially because it's going to take the coaching staff, it's going to take the players to all rally around Josh and say, hey, just take a step back. You don't have to go win every game. Can you do that? And lo and behold, this game, like, he just took the check down. Whenever he saw someone open, his first read was open. That's where the ball went. He didn't test the ball downfield all that much. And like you said, he 31 of 37, 274 yards, 3 touchdowns, incredibly efficient. It's actually his third highest completion percentage of his
Oh, wow.
career. Week one last season against the Rams was his second highest. And then his highest of all time was the Patriots playoff game, 21 of 25 for an 84% completion percentage. Yeah, the patience of Josh Allen was the thing that stuck out to me most, because that's something that is so hard to get him to do, is not constantly go for the home run. And this week, it really left me positive and hoping for more the rest of the season, that Josh is kind of turning a point, maybe in maturity, where he's looking at it at a more patient perspective.
Yeah. Well, one thing that I've kind of thought of was after that week one performance, you kind of, even though he says he's keeping himself leveled, even though they very much preach balance in the locker room, you do wonder, what is the mental toll of a performance like that? It's your first game of the season. You're against a divisional rival. You're in primetime television. And not only do you put up one of your worst performances in primetime ever, if not the worst, but you also get essentially the treatment as the butt of the joke the entire week. And that has to weigh heavy. And when that happens, you know that all you can do is work, put yourself back in, the film room, get yourself right, and just really refine your game. And that's why it's nice to see that. But I just hope that down the stretch of the season, that's reinforced, because if Allen can just maintain that composure and keep that patient approach and understand that it doesn't always have to be downfield, I really do believe that this Bills offense is just absolutely one of the most efficient, if not the most efficient in the league. And what you saw against the Raiders could just be the norm against any team that isn't an insanely talented defense like the Jets.
Yeah, and kind of made me just realize something I thought of during the game and watching it, is teams are going to keep playing the Bills the same way. They're going to keep playing that too high shell, force Josh to beat him underneath. And if Josh can consistently beat people underneath, they're going to have to adjust their defenses. But in watching that game yesterday, at least, a lot of the times their two safeties were so deep, the Bills were essentially playing 11 on 9.
Yeah.
If you're going to play the Bills 11 on 9 with Josh Allen as the quarterback, with Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis and Dalton Kincaid and Dawson Knox, you're not going to win. Like, as long as Josh reels himself in and says, I can just win 11 on 9, I'm not going to go test those two guys deep. Why would I do that? I can walk up and down the field. Hell, yesterday the Bills had, I think it was like a little bit over 40 minutes of ball control. The Raiders had under 20. Yeah. And that's how you don't just win a game, you dominate a game. And I know one thing I saw all over Twitter today was this idea that, like, well, the Raiders aren't very good. I agree. They're not a great team. They're not an awful team. They were 1-0. They did beat the Broncos. But if you beat a team in the modern NFL by 28 points, I don't care how bad they are. Like, that's not easy to do. And the Bills essentially obliterated this Raiders team.
Yeah, definitely. And the Raiders, that kind of messes me up, because I understand that Jimmy G is the quarterback, and obviously they haven't had defensive success, but also you play who's on your schedule. And the same way that people will want to throw flack on them for the fact that they beat a team that's not great is the same argument you were going to get if they struggled to beat them. Like, any given Sunday, blowing out teams in the NFL is very hard. And it's almost like we've become so accustomed to it because the Sean McDermott coach team has had a pattern of blowing teams out every season, when the reality is you see plenty of good teams around the league that don't actually do that, but play down to teams' competition and end up having close games when they don't need to. So it's the Raiders, but they still blew them out and had a complete game of football, and they're dangerous no matter who they play.
Yeah. And speaking of complete games of football, is even the Bills, essentially their weakest links, let's say, stepped up this game. So going into this game, I was terrified of it. I tweeted it out multiple times. Spencer Brown against Max Crosby was maybe the biggest mismatch I could picture or think up. And lo and behold, this game saw Spencer Brown play pretty damn well against one of the best edge rushers in football. What do you think of the game plan? What do you think of the way Spencer Brown played and the way the Bills controlled Max Crosby?
So very pleased with Spencer Brown's play, going back and watching a few of his key reps. Some things that he'd want back, but other plays where he was downright successful against Max Crosby in a one-on-one. But really like the fact that the Bills emphasized throwing him assistance on that side of the line, adding in some chips with the tight ends that could go into routes that you could kind of get the ball out to afterwards, and also just kind of predicating their approach on being efficient and getting the ball out quickly and not having to really force Josh in a bind where he does have to hold the ball. And in the few situations where he did, it did feel like he had time to make a throw or at least read the field, which was good. Not an otherworldly performance by him, but definitely encouraging to see him go against Crosby or even some of the other linemen that they lined up against him and have success. And as a run blocker, I mean, he's excellent in that. I don't think I had a bad thing to say about his run blocking when they pulled him across and helped out the left side with McGovern. That was dastardly and created some really nice gaps for the team. So good performance, got to keep it up. And going up against Washington, that's a much more complete defensive line. That'll be another big test for him.
The one thing you mentioned there too was the help they gave him. The Dawson Knox chipping was incredibly important this game. And the thing for me, at least, is it excites me for the remainder of the season is the Bills know that they have that ability. Knox has the talent, has the athleticism to chip on the edge, but also still get out and get open to catch a pass. There was one play, I think it was Ant over Pro Ant from Cover One kind of tweeted out where Max Crosby might be 8 yards to the right of Spencer Brown. Like he's way out there coming way off the edge. And Dawson Knox is essentially playing slot receiver at that point in time. The Bills had it set up perfectly. Knox went in, put the initial block on him. Spencer Brown waited for him to come in. It gave him the extra time he needed. It gave Josh the extra time he needed. And Knox still goes out in the flat. And I don't believe he caught the ball that play, but still open. I think that this is kind of going to be the plan with Spencer Brown moving forward is the Bills know that he's limited. He's not going to be, this great right tackle that I think everyone wants, but the Bills have ways to mitigate that. And one of the ways they're mitigating it is this 12 personnel we're seeing. The Bills are essentially playing 12 personnel, I believe, amongst the most in the league. And that's what happens when you have Dawson Knox, who's already an established veteran tight end, and now Dalton Kincaid, who's playing good football. He's playing complete football too. I think a lot of people thought he was just going to be the slot receiver that goes out and catch passes. No, the Bills are lining him up right on the line of scrimmage. He's blocking, he's making plays in the open field blocking as well. Like this 12 personnel is really working for Buffalo. And it makes me just think about last year and how that was the goal for the Bills. And they just couldn't do it because they didn't believe in an OJ Howard, rightfully so. So now it's just unlocking even more potential this season, and seeing what Spencer Brown was able to do because of that 12 personnel, again, makes me just believe that this offense is only going to get better. It's not going to get worse.
Yeah, and just get used to that because that's what you're going to do the entire course of the year because left side of the line, I think is excellent, and I think is going to continue to have premier play. I mean, Dawkins and McGovern were absolutely dominant in that game. McGovern, so far in each week, has progressed, and I think he's going to be a stellar addition. We know what Morse is, but now you just really know that your deficiency, which might not be a deficiency over the full course of the year, at least right now, is Spencer Brown as he continues to develop at his position and with a full year of, working with Cromer, having training camp under his belt. Now, over the course of the year, you can just continue on with those chips and that tight end assistance and just be able to kind of get away with it. Because as long as you're running out of 12 personnel, not only will that be there, but it's very likely that you're just going to have an option open underneath, especially if teams are going to just continue to throw too high shells at the Bills. And the beauty is that the second they don't, they'll see it. They're probably salivating at the idea that teams want to switch to like a cover one and just leave that back end of the field open. So it's almost this beautiful grouping that really puts defenses in a bind because at a point, as long as Allen's dialed in, they're indefendable. Like they just straight up have a way to beat you in anything you show them pre-snap and post-snap.
Yeah, and it's going to open up eventually too. That's another thing I keep reminding myself is Allen can dink and dunk. He can dink and dunk with the best in the league if he has to. He just doesn't want to. However, at some point in time, you have to pull the safety. You can't just let the Bills run up and down the field on you like they did against the Raiders because they're going to put up 38 points. And you're not going to beat the Bills if they put up 38 points. So at some point, you're going to pull those safeties forward. And the second you do, Ken Dorsey's going to see it. Josh Allen's going to see it. They're going to send Gabe Davis on a go route. And then that's it. The Bills, now we're hitting you deep. Now what do? You're put in this huge pickle where you can't go back to too high because if you do, they're just going to dink and dunk down the field. If you do go to too high, or if you don't go to too high, they're going to hit you deep at like every play. And then you add to all of this now that the Bills can run the ball. Like James Cook is seemingly turning into the running back the Bills hoped he would when they took him in the second round last season.
Yes.
Second round pick. And he rushed for 123 yards, which I believe is the most by a runner not named Josh Allen in the Josh Allen era. So James Cook, thoughts on him, thoughts on the run game in totality?
Yeah, it was really nice to see it get going. I had a little bit of concern when the game started and it felt like they just couldn't clear gaps out for Cook over the middle, but I really think that improved once they switched the pace with Latavius Murray, had a power back go in there, someone that was kind of bullying them in the trenches a bit and able to get some extra yards. And when you have that kind of relief from just the pure kind of speedy, shifty style of James Cook, you're just putting defenses in an even bigger bind, especially when, again, you're running out of 12 personnel because you have the extra tight ends for blocking. You have the uncertainty of whether this team is going to run play action and try to beat you over top or not. And then you also have one underrated component of this is Josh Allen's ball faking skills, which sells the play action and makes things infinitely more difficult to predict. So because of that, these defenses are now just sitting there kind of having to guess way more pre-snap, and that plays into it. And then when you have change of pace backs that are power runners, downhill guys like Murray and Harris, they're just going to clear through, get that spacing, and then eventually you just capitalize with Cook's speed and his elusiveness and also playing him to more of the outside, which is where he just absolutely thrives. I have his stats right now. He averaged 7.2 yards per carry in this game with 123 yards. I mean, he blossomed, and this is what I think is going to be the start of a very productive year for him. I still don't think he touches 1,000. I don't think a rusher on the Bills touches 1,000, but really great game from him. I'm very encouraged by Cook, the whole room in general, and I think, again, the beauty of this running room is the goal line opportunities, the fact that you're seeing that they're trying to drive the nail in with these power backs and keep it out of Josh's hands. Don't worry, guys. Josh will still find a way to make a dumbass play in the end zone, but it's still nice to see that Latavius Murray, Damian Harris are getting meaningful snaps. And if the Bills can just refine that part of their red zone offense, I really think they're in for a treat this year.
Yeah, and I mean, you brought up the early struggles too. Like Cook at the beginning of the game wasn't really flashing. I mean, he was fine. He only had one negative run all day, which is a pretty important stat as well. But early on in the game, he didn't really seem to be finding any holes or what have you. And the Bill said, "Okay, that's fine. Put Latavius Murray in." And then he just started running downhill and beating up on the Raiders. And that, I think, kind of changed the tone of the game where the Raiders said, "Okay, they're going to put Murray in. He's going to beat the snot out of us." And then the Bills were able to switch back to Cook, and they just kept going to the edge. And when Cook would get to the edge, he'd still have to beat a guy one-on-one, and he just has this incredibly quick cut to the outside. He did it a bunch of times, just plants his right foot and kicks to the edge, and just he uses his speed, he uses his acceleration, and just can run by people and run through people. Like James Cook is turning into kind of that complete back I feel like the Bills have wanted for a long time. And I say that as somebody who's stand Devin Singletary forever. I love Devin Singletary. I thought he was incredibly underrated with the Bills. But James Cook, he has just a little bit more juice, at least for me. I think a big part of it is that kind of breakaway speed. He can get to the edge and go. And we saw that this week. And when that is added onto everything else we've already talked about with the offense, it just changes the difficulty in defending this team. Do you want to send your edge rushers flying at Josh Allen on every single play? Fine. Then hand it off to Cook, go to the edge. Like the Bills are becoming, like you said, indefensible. And that's something they've been borderline indefensible for years, but there's been little parts that they've missed. They've missed that extra tight end. They've missed a running back that can break a big one. And now they seemingly are finding all those pieces with a better offensive line, with a smarter Josh Allen, possibly, like not to overreact on 1 week, but the offense just clicked. This was one of the more impressive offensive performances by the Bills in quite some time.
Yes. And I think one thing you could take away from the game, it's perfectly fair to say it's one game, and I fully agree. And I'm still cautiously optimistic because, with the type of offense that they're running now, it's sustained drives, which means more plays, which means more margin for error, or less margin for error. I apologize. So naturally, that's going to have some hiccups in the road. You're going to play a good defense. You're going to have a team that kind of snuffs out some plays in the backfield. Honestly, the first quarter, the Raiders were doing a pretty good job of it. I mean, a few screens that got blown up, but that's the beauty of having Josh Allen, is that if we were talking about a quarterback that was a bit more of a game manager, that didn't really have the arm or the athletic upside or the precision that he has, I'd be a bit more concerned that the one-dimensional style of the offense couldn't ever expand. But this offense can still beat you vertically. They are just simply being patient and waiting to get their chops in. And when they do, you just have no way to approach them. I mean, it really does feel like, yes, they beat up on a team that many consider bad, but again, it was the best not the best you're going to. That is what the team can be when they're all clicking. And I don't think the Raiders are the last team to face that from them.
Yeah, and I think what the Bills, to me at least, showed, and one thing I'll say, the Raiders just aren't a very talented defensive team. They do have the one absolute game record in Max Crosby, but outside of him, Marcus Peters is fairly old now. Like Nate Hobbs isn't great, Marcus Epps isn't great. Like there's no other player outside of Max Crosby that I see and say, okay, that guy's going to be a problem. I think that's what the Bills kind of showed, though, is you have to have more than one guy. Like you have to have more than one dominant defender now to defend this Bills team. The Jets have many dominant defenders. That's why they're able to play the Bills better than a team like the Raiders. That being said, the Bills should have never lost to the Jets. It was Josh being boneheaded essentially the entire game. Now knowing he doesn't have to do that, now knowing that the Bills can beat you in all these different ways, with all the teams on the horizon, it doesn't matter to me if you have one game record. You have to have two, you have to have three, you have to have four. And there just aren't many teams in the NFL like that. Like the Bills aren't playing the 49ers this year. We don't, at least in the regular season, we don't have to worry about a defense like that. We're not playing the Steelers, who have a Minka Fitzpatrick, a TJ Watt, a Cam Hayward. The teams that the Bills are going to face for the remainder of the season, like let's talk about the Dolphins real quick. I mean, you have Xavier Howard, you have Christian Wilkins. They don't have Jalen Ramsey. Jalen Phillips is decent, but they don't really have the game records. I think that this team is kind of showing you have to be able to match the Bills' talent on offense, or at least come within, let's say, 70% of their talent. And there's just not many teams that can do that. And for that reason, I think that this offense is just going to continue to be better, continue to put up crazy games. Like 38 points is so many points. I feel like we're all just forgetting 38 points. Yeah, the Bills scored. That's a ton of points. That's a ridiculous number of points in the NFL.
And it could have been 45, like in the drop of a hat.
Yeah.
Which is nuts. Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I think that the one thing I said about the Jets game was they got to play that game on the road to start the season. So you got that, first off, playing on that god-awful stadium, on that god-awful field. You get that done. And thankfully, everyone survived. And on the Bills side, I apologize. But it's really like a matter of now that game's over and you played that defense, you got punched in the mouth early by a great defense. You have the best of the best on tape, and you can kind of carry the lessons from that game over to teams that you frankly just are better than on paper. And this is not disrespecting the Washington Commanders, who are a 2-0 team, have earned that record, have a very good defensive line, have some great talented pieces in the secondary, and also an emerging quarterback who has played very well and had a phenomenal game against Denver. But that is a team that, if you compare their defense to the Jets, I'm far more scared of the Jets defense. And I think now you have these adjustments that you can make if you're facing some of the similar woes, like great interior D-line from, Daron Payne and Montez Sweat, and then Chase Young and all of these guys that they have. It really feels like that experience is going to help them a lot, especially when they get to other good defenses like Miami, New England, like teams that they're going to face in their own division later this year.
Yeah, and for the Commanders, like full credit to them, you're 2-0. Like they've earned the right to be considered at least a threat. Like they're undefeated. They actually have a better record than the Bills. At the same time they face Josh Dobbs and Russell Wilson. Like Josh Allen's a different animal than those two players. This Bills offense is a different animal, and they just gave up 33 points to Russell Wilson, a Russell Wilson team that only scored, I think, 16 on this Raiders team. So I think that the Commanders, and it's actually a game that I will be at in person, which should be interesting. I think they're in maybe for a rude awakening when they run into like the uber talented Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs just playing out of his mind, and Gabe Davis using his hands, and everything else on this offense. It is a really exciting day, a really exciting victory Monday after the way the Bills just dismantled the Raiders.
Yeah, and one matchup that I think people should watch out for is our defensive line going up against the Commanders' offensive line. Someone told me this morning that the Commanders' offensive line is currently ranked 30th in the NFL. And, take that for what you will. It's 2 games. But yeah, I mean, the Cardinals they got a lot of pressure in Washington and only held them to about 17 points despite losing that game. And the Broncos defense has holes. It has a lot of holes. I mean, their defensive line is young and missing pieces. They have a great corner, but really outside of that, it feels like an incomplete or at least very top heavy defense that doesn't really keep them in too much of, anything. And it's kind of tough when your offense is missing all these receivers. So I think Washington's degree of difficulty as far as facing the Bills is going to go up significantly. I think the Bills pass rush has a great opportunity. I think Brian Robinson had a great game, but I think Josh Jacobs is the better back, and therefore you have a better matchup. But yeah, it's still a tall test. They still have to come out and play a complete game, and they have to take the opponent seriously. So let's see if they do it.
Yeah. I want to go to the defense, especially because you mentioned Josh Jacobs, but do you have any last thing you want to say about the offense? Anything we miss? Any player you want to kind of shout out and talk about a little bit?
I mean, I will give shout out to Khalil Shakir for catching a touchdown at a very opportune time. I mean, a lot of adversity facing him with the snap count and everything. Very nice to see him come up big in a big spot in the game. And then, the whole offense did great, but Dalton Kincaid is going to be a stud, man. I mean, he's going to be a stud. Just watching him, it feels like he's paying his dues early when it comes to blocking and just, dirty work, tight end stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Man, I am so freaking excited to see him emerge. And the crazy part was on the throw into the end zone that got, obviously dropped because he got hit by two guys, should have been a penalty. That hit him in the hands. Like, he was close to catching that ball. That would have been a crazy catch, but pinpoint shot from Allen, almost done by Kincaid. That connection is going to be fierce, and he's going to be a big part of what they do this year. Huge shout out to him.
And one more note on Kincaid. I didn't realize how shifty he was going to be. He made, I think, 3 Raiders players miss on one of his catches in the most oddly unathletic shiftiness I think I've ever seen in an NFL player. But he's shifty, which is an added bonus to a player that the Bills hope can actually bring a little bit of yak to the Bills. Something, again, that they've been missing for years and years.
Big time.
Hopping over to the defense, and you mentioned Josh Jacobs, so I actually want to start there. The Bills held him to -2 yards. I don't know if there's a more dominant stat line I could think. That's not what I thought. The Bills might hold him to 60 yards, and I would have been happy with that. To hold a player like Josh Jacobs of his caliber, and granted, he's a little bit rusty, not really working at all this offseason, but -2 yards, that's a ridiculous statistic, and it is another thing that I can look at this game and kind of get the bad taste of the Jets game out of my mouth, where people were said, oh, the Bills can't defend the run. The Bills just can't defend the run. And they just held the reigning rushing champion to -2 yards in the game. First time that's ever been done the year after somebody earned the rushing title.
Yeah, they were dominant. That all started in the trenches. The interior defensive line, specifically Daquan Jones and Ed Oliver, were absolute menaces and just making their way. The only time they really got stopped was if you sent double or triple teams at them and kind of had space. But Jacobs had nothing going for him, man. There were no lanes. There was nothing he could create. Every single run that he got going forward, going downhill, going left, going right, was met by a Bills defender to some degree. And they were just absolutely dominant. And it was really impressive. And it bodes a lot of confidence because I referred you when I did my show, but you mentioned about the, and I don't know if you were planning to get to this, so I apologize if I spoil it, but the deviation when it comes to evaluating running. And you mentioned, yeah, explosive plays suck. But at the end of the day, I need to see the volume throughout a whole game. And the Jets game was 3.3 yards per carry. This game has to be less, I would imagine. They were dominant. It's not even like me just blowing smoke. They had the line of scrimmage under complete control. When their interior defensive line is healthy, as well as their phenomenal edge setters with Gregory Rousseau and Leonard Floyd, they can stop anybody. And they just took the rushing champion to hell. -2 yards. That's not even exaggerating. That is an unbelievable performance that they should be proud of and carry with them going up against this Washington team.
Yeah. And you mentioned the standard deviation that I always harp on. I've been doing this for years now, and I wish it was a stat that the NFL would focus on just a little bit more and actually create something to explain it. Maybe that's something I'll try to do this offseason. Essentially, it boils down to me, if a player is going to run the ball one time for 90 yards, but the rest of the game is only going to get 3 yards a carry, I would take that over a player getting literally 7 yards a carry. Like
Mhm.
the deviation matters because it changes the pace of the game. So when we go back to that Jets game, it sucked to watch Brees Hall run for 83 yards, even though Christian Benford ran him down, which was awesome. But the remainder of the game, like he had a 26-yard run, that was another big one. But other than that, the Bills kind of kept him in check. Do you wish you could cut out that 86-yard run? Yeah. Well, the Bills did that this week. They're not going to do it every week. Someone's going to break another big one on them. But at the same time, if the Bills can be consistent and reduce the deviation and create a system where they're only giving up 3.5 yards a carry for the most part with the occasional big run in, yeah, your run defense is going to be really good. And a sign of being really good is holding a runner to negative yards. It's like I said, 38 points. We don't talk enough about how many points that is. That's a ridiculous number in the modern NFL. -2 is even more ridiculous. That just doesn't happen. You just fall forward. You got more than -2 yards. Like 9 rushes for -2 yards is massive. You said Daquan Jones and Ed Oliver, they had a monster game. Greg Rousseau on the edge.
Yeah.
There was a couple plays where Jacobs tried to bounce it and Groot was just there with his long ass arms. So that defensive line is something special. I only think they're going to get better too. Like Von Miller's not even on the field. This
Nope.
defensive line is going to get better.
Yeah, Rousseau's presence on the edge is just so noticeable. And the way he uses his length to just push people back and to get into those lanes is unreal, man. Like I have said from the start of the offseason, I will keep saying it. I don't even care if he finishes the year with like 9 sacks, although I think he is going to hit double digits this year. Mm-hmm. His presence alone and what he brings to that defensive line, especially in tandem with all this talent, is so big, and he's going to have a monster year. And I looked at it because I had notes up, but because I messed this up before. But yeah, best part about the way they shut down a rushing defense is it just, again, binds the offense that can't stretch you out vertically. And it ended up being the reason that the Bills' time of possession was 40 minutes and the Raiders were 19, like 4 seconds under 20. It's wild.
Yeah. Yeah. I also, Greg Rousseau and Ed Oliver, too, those 2 players that I wanted to talk about in particular, because Ed Oliver, in particular for Bills fans, was somebody that a lot of Bills fans didn't want extended. We're surprised about the extension that people deem big money. And it is fairly big money, though, in the tackle market's a little less than current market rate. Deservedly so. He's not Quinnen Williams. He hasn't proven to be a player like him. But we're seeing kind of this evolution from Ed Oliver. We're seeing an evolution from Greg Rousseau, 2 Bills first-round picks at defensive line. And it's paying dividends, again, only 2 games in the season. So pumping the brakes just a little bit because we have a ways to go here. Mm-hmm. But Ed Oliver is being a dominant force. It's not showing up on the stat sheet all that much, but every single play he's blowing back whoever's in front of him. He's in the backfield. He's putting pressure on the quarterback. He's making the runner change their lane, change their vision, change the way they look. And then Greg Rousseau off the edge, like we've said, his length is so important. He's just dominant against the run, and he's getting better as a pass rusher. And right now he's doing that without teams having to focus on who will be on the other side soon in Von Miller. The Bills basically have this great rotation at defensive end. They have a great rotation on the interior. And what's been an issue for the Bills for years, that they get beat in the trenches, this team has the ability to not only not get beat in the trenches, but dominate in the trenches.
Yeah, and I think the beauty of Ed Oliver's play is, again, it works in tandem with who's next to him, and he really thrives off having Daquan Jones there. Yeah. I mean, another member of that line who's absolutely dominant when he's just in a one-on-one. It's just so tough because, again, even without Von Miller, I've noticed that they can hit home with a 4-man rush because who are you going to double team? Someone's going to break through because they just have that ability to get pressure. So when you're giving Ed these one-on-one matchups, man, he is vicious. Like, just... it's a different player when he's in that circumstance. And I love it because, I had this idea that, we always hear the negative side of someone getting paid, but sometimes you get a positive side. And it almost feels to me, this is no basis to the statement whatsoever. I'm prefacing, it's just me going off pure vibes. But sometimes I wonder if a player gets that contract, gets that situated, that's off your shoulders, off your mind, and you could just go play ball. And that's what it feels like Ed's doing right now. And it's just so encouraging to see. And I really hope that he could sustain this play over the course of the year.
Yeah, I actually like that point too about the contract. And I actually think it goes even further. I think it becomes, I have to live up to that number now. You gave
Mhm.
me this money. You put your faith in me. This fan base is going to be my fan base for for the foreseeable future. I have to live up to that number. Otherwise, I'm going to be embarrassed with myself. And Ed through 2 games is living. The thing is, he's outplaying his contract right now. He's
Mhm.
outplaying the number they gave him. He's again got ways to go. He's flashed his entire career. There's been moments where it's like, that's the dominant player the Bills took at 9 overall. That's who we think he could be. But it was in spurts. It was against the Lions last year, and then he disappeared for a few weeks.
Mhm.
This season so far, through 2 weeks, he's been consistently dominant. And now they're going to go play a Commanders offensive line that's ranked 30th in the NFL. Like,
Yeah.
Ed Oliver should continue to be dominant again. It's just it's another thing where we talked about the trenches on the offensive side, and how the Bills are finding ways to win there. They look like they're improved there. Well, the Bills' defensive line looks like they've improved as well, and it's not just because they brought in a Leonard Floyd or a Puna Ford. It's because their players that have been here for some time now are also getting better, which is even more important than the additions.
And a part of Ed Oliver evaluation too from last year is people forget he got hurt in week 1
Yep.
and it was a soft tissue injury that just lingered for a few weeks and really like got to imagine when you have a hamstring injury as a DT like going off of your leg and getting acceleration's tough. It's
Mhm.
painful and if it's not fully healed, you're not going to be the same player. So this is healthy Ed and this is healthy Daquan and this is the healthy line and like when you have them at the top of their game in full health, this is what you're going to see from them. And it's only going to get better when Vaughn eventually gets there.
Yeah. So we're gonna give 2 players flowers and leading into another 2 players I want to talk about. So I believe it was Daquan Jones, on the first interception of the game that got the
Yes.
pressure up the middle, created the situation where Jimmy Garoppolo kind of had to step forward and to his right, and then Greg Rousseau's there with his wild hands in the air and just swats the ball. And it happens to fall into Terrell Bernard's hands, who had a good game. Terrell Bernard at linebacker, and then also Matt Milano continues to be a great linebacker. The Bills, again, another area that we looked at originally, I think, going into the season as a weakness, just like Spencer Brown. Terrell Bernard is playing well enough so far. It doesn't mean he's great, but he hasn't been awful. He's been decent, and he's only going to get better, or he should only get better with more experience. And Matt Milano just continues to be, all pro Milano. I mean, I don't even know what to say about him when he's mossing running backs right now.
Yeah, Matt Milano is disgusting in all the best ways. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just I gush over him and I'm still gushing over him, but that was just an unbelievable performance. I mean, first and foremost, almost all of our turnovers this season are from linebackers, save for the Dane Jackson fumble that got recovered, I believe, by Taylor Rapp. So
Yep.
it's just the Moss linebacker play. I have never seen that, and the fact that that happened is unreal. He's just such a force. And honestly, it feels to me that Bernard is feeding off of Milano's energy. I mean, you
Mhm.
watch them pre and post snap, the viciousness that Milano brings in every hit, the kind of tactician he is, where he's trying to size you up, find the angle, get there when he needs to get there. I'm seeing that from Bernard. But the difference is Bernard just is really commanding the defensive line and getting everybody set. And there's been some communication errors. There were some against
Mhm.
the Raiders. But like, for a second year guy, that's fine. It's going to happen. But he really looks poised. He looks comfortable. And also, I saw a play where Terrell Bernard was the lone man in the B gap and absolutely brought down Josh Jacobs one on one. So I saw this and was like, man, if he's making these hits this early in the season, just wait till he gets comfortable. Very pleased with what I'm seeing from them.
Yeah, and to the communications issues, actually, Eric Turner was the one that pointed it out, at least for me on Twitter. We tweeted it out yesterday early on in the game. He said you can see Bernard struggling with the crowd noise because Bills fans are wild when the opposing offense has the ball, and Bernard couldn't hear. He was struggling to hear, struggling to get the plays set up, and that's probably why that first drive went so poorly for the Bills. Is one, they weren't getting set, and two, the scripted ability that offenses have in that initial drive always is going to provide them an advantage. Bills cleaned it up very shortly after that, but so did Bernard. And he's a player that is going to have to get better. Like, he's going to have to continue to get better throughout the season, but he has a little bit of Milano in him with those instincts. He knows what gap the ball is going to go through. And that comes through, one, just pure innate instinctual ability. And two, a massive amount of film study. Players on the Bills always talk about Matt Milano, and he only watches film. He's watching film to like 24 hours a day, essentially, because he knows that if he does that, he's going to have an advantage over these people that are more athletic than him, are stronger than him. If he knows where the runner is going to be, he can hit that gap, and he doesn't have to worry about all the maybe deficiencies, let's say, in his game. And he changes those deficiencies into efficiencies. I think Bernard is built in the same light. I think that we all kind of still want a Tremaine Edmonds-esque player, I think, with the length and the pure physical talent, but Bernard's going to win in a very different way. And so far through the first two games, he's playing good football. He's playing solid starting middle linebacker football to a point where I think a player like Christian Kirksey, who Bills fans were, pounding the table to get him starting, get him right onto the field with Milano. Like right now, no, I'm fine with Bernard. Like Kirksey's great to have on the practice squad in case of an emergency, but Bernard's played good football.
Yeah, there's no reason to take Bernard out of the game right now, and doing so would completely obliterate his confidence and also be stupid because he's good right now. And I hope he continues it. Again, 1 game or 2 games for him at least. But one thing that I loved that your co-host David brought up on my show this weekend was really about kind of how we assess linebackers for the Bills, because we've grown so accustomed to Tremaine Edmonds and his freak size and his freak range. And don't get me wrong, those were all fantastic traits. And I do think that you are going to miss that when it comes to middle of the field coverage. But at the same time, again, you said it, Terrell Bernard's just a different style. And it really does feel like someone said in the chat, I think it's Roy, I got to look here, but it feels like you have 2 Milanos on the field right now. And that's not a bad thing. McDermott has traditionally coached linebackers who are like in the 6'1" range, and they've been very successful. He wants thumpers. He wants aggressive, wise communicators who are there to make a play and get their hands dirty. And that's what it feels like Bernard is right now. So that's really making me encouraged and excited, because what I worried about with Bernard is that he was going to look like a deer in headlights. He was going to look like he was in all the wrong angles, that he wasn't in the right gaps, that he wasn't making his assignments, making his reads correctly, that it almost felt like a puppy out there. I have not seen that from him one bit. Communication errors aside, like he has looked poised, confident, and it feels like having someone like Milano next to him is just greatly benefiting him now and will only continue to do so as the weeks go on.
Yeah, I mean, the deer in the headlights, it's just, you're right, it hasn't been there. Like he's looked like he belongs, which is something that was really important to me going into this season. Is, as soon as I saw Tyrell Dodson play in the preseason, and we saw AJ Klein, knew what Klein was, it became a point where it's like it has to be Terrell Bernard. Granted, we hadn't seen him play. We knew it had to be him because the other two just it wouldn't have worked. And right now it's working. And I love that you keep going back to Bernard feeding on Milano. It seems to be that way, that Bernard's learning from Milano. And if you have 2 little Milanos running around there, like if I have 2 Matt Milanos on the field at linebacker, I don't care that they're smaller. They're a small linebacking duo by NFL standards. Having 2 Matt Milanos is incredible, because you're talking about one of the best linebackers in football, and now a guy who's maybe mini Milano would be awesome. Terrell Bernard's been pretty damn good so far, and it'd be interesting to continue watching him. Along with Terrell Bernard, another player that kind of had to earn his starting spot and has played very well, CB2 Christian Benford. I don't really know what to say about this guy other than henceforth he's a first round pick to me. The Bills drafted him in the first round, and they drafted Kaiir Elam in the 6th round. All is right in the world. Like Christian Benford is playing like a first round pick. He's a legitimate starting corner in the NFL that the Bills found out of FCS Villanova.
Yeah, man, that's the craziest part. Fun fact, I have a bet with my friend that if Benford makes a Pro Bowl, I'm buying his jersey, because he's a Philly guy. So he was like, "Oh, dude, Nova guy, I pay attention. If he does well for you, you got to do it." So you all heard it. If he makes the Pro Bowl this year, I'm buying Christian Benford's jersey. But yeah, man, I mean, earned the keep in training camp, has shown that he can play zone, but he also has the ability to cover man to man. The track down on the Breece Hall run in week 1 was phenomenal effort that literally saved a touchdown and held them to 3 points. But really, that pass breakup on, was it Devontae Adams, I believe, or someone downfield? I can't remember who the receiver was off the top. I apologize, but he made a really nice play. I know people in the moment thought it was PI. It wasn't PI. He got there. He maybe brushed him, but he made a play on the ball, and he paced himself well, felt the receiver, broke in on him when he needed to, got up there and made a fantastic play that saved them from probably putting points on the board. So I was really impressed with that. I've been impressed with him as a tackler. I've been impressed with him in run defense. He really has just been such a find for this organization. And I want to say, like, I'm not out on Kyrie Elam. I don't think you are. I don't think you're insinuating that.
Yeah.
I'm not out on him at all. I think he's still got a place on this team and there will be a spot for him. I just really feel like he is a project that just has to develop and is taking way longer. Whereas Benford had gone to a smaller school and gotten kind of overlooked, but had the skill set to just be more ready in this defense. And last year he was doing it and then he got hurt. This year, this is what you're seeing from him. He's been fantastic. Like, this is a hell of a find for them. And really, like, each week I'm just getting more and more confident over like going up teams with great receivers, because apart from Trey, who I already have faith in, this kid can ball and like he can go toe to toe with your receivers. So encouraged by Christian Benford. Really, really good season so far from him.
Yeah, that deep ball. And the only reason I know it, I looked it up right before we came on live. It was Trey Tucker was the receiver. Okay. So on that play, and this is another, you brought up that Breece Hall play. That was pure effort to go make that run to chase him down, and one that earns you kudos with Sean McDermott. Will love him forever because of that play. Because Sean McDermott, like, his favorite thing is effort. If you're going to give 100% on every single play, Sean McDermott is going to love you. You're going to get the benefit of the doubt because of that. Christian Benford doing that was just probably part of the reason that he's starting at CB2. On that Trey Tucker play, Benford gets beat. Like, he gets beat off the jump and he has to recover. He recovers. He makes a great play on the ball. I think the ref actually did drop the flag. And then they said, no, that wasn't PI, because it literally wasn't PI. It was a great play by Benford. I think he's been pretty damn good so far this year. I am interested though, because the Bills really haven't, the first 2 weeks, the receivers they have played haven't been great. Jets had Garrett Wilson and then, Allen Lazard, and meanwhile, Zach Wilson's throwing to them. This week it's Devontae Adams, superstar, but then it's, Hunter Renfrow, who the Raiders refuse to use at all, which makes no sense. And then it's Jimmy Garoppolo. Like, these aren't world-beating quarterback wide receiver duos, right? You have two really good wide receivers. You have two mediocre quarterbacks. Once the Bills get to, let's say, the Dolphins game, where it's Tua Tagovailoa, it's Tyreek Hill, it's Jalen Waddle, you're going to have way more, focus placed on those corners. Can Christian Benford compete consistently with a player like Jalen Waddle, with a player like Tyreek Hill? That's something I want to see before I'm fully going to believe it. I think Benford's played really well. I'm very confident in the way he's playing, but once you get to those games against the Eagles, against the Dolphins, against the Bengals, that's when we really are going to see what Benford is.
Yeah, there's a lot of testing coming for this defense and offense, frankly, in the coming weeks. So that's why it's important to remember that there's a lot of season left. You can be happy with this win. I'm very happy with it. As I've alluded to, it's great to see complete football. But yeah, this secondary is going to be tested. It actually can start this week because Johan Dotson and going with Terry McLaurin, who are two very good receivers. Terry McLaurin's a freaking beast and might be the most underrated wide receiver in the league. That's a test right there. But yeah, the speed of Miami. I mean, I'm a firm believer that offense is good enough to beat anybody and any defense. It could beat the Jets. It could beat whoever, because the speed and the timing and the mismatches that Mike McDaniel creates and that they try to capitalize on, it gives everyone headaches. And couple that in with a very good running game. So it's kind of a double-edged sword for me, because it's like, if the Dolphins score points, I expect them to score points. And I also don't know if that's an indictment on the defense or not. But I think that game's also going to be Kyrie Elam's kind of opportunity, because that's really where they've tried him out in the past, and he held his own. And, that press man style that can kind of jam receivers at the line of scrimmage and throw things out of rhythm, that's really where I see them having success. And I think they have a really nice opportunity in this week and against Miami to kind of showcase the young talent and see what you got, because I really do have a lot of confidence in them right now.
Yeah, I mean, we've also talked about all three levels of the Bills, and this game, at every single level, the Bills seem to play well. The one concern on defense I had was that Devontae Adams was consistently winning one-on-one. Like the Bills were basically allowing him to get free and get by himself. But you're talking about an all-world wide receiver, so that tends to happen with them. That is one concern I have. But other than that, against the Raiders in particular, I mean, the Bills they played a complete game essentially. You take that first drive out of the game, and the Bills scored 38 points to the Raiders 3, holding the Josh Jacobs to -2 yards. Josh Allen playing a near flawless game. I mean, I don't really think there's anything Bills fans could have asked for after the debacle that was week 1.
Yeah, and that's something that I said earlier. With that game, it really just, again, stresses the fact that you don't have to air the ball out to put up 38 points. Like, that's the best part about it, is your defense can get takeaways and help you out. But really, these methodical long-term drives that you've put together and been successful with, they're able to bring you points and to get you a significant margin of, winning the turnover ratio and winning the time of possession battle and getting all of these things in favor of your offense and then just commanding the game. So I'm really, really happy with the way that they've kind of trotted this game plan out both weeks. And that's a game that, again, long season, stay realistic, but be encouraged too. They really did play some great ball on Sunday.
For sure. I want to do one last thing kind of before we wrap up here. I want to talk about a couple other teams before we kind of go to watch the Browns play the Steelers. But before doing that, I just want Greg and Aaron to talk about One Pass really quick.
Many people ask us the best way to support us here at Cover One, and that is to sign up to become a Cover One Pass member. That contribution helps give us the access to all the data and information we use to create the content that you love.
And I think most importantly, brings you into our community of insiders. It's a great community based on Slack. I know a lot of people don't want to be on social media anymore or be in on those conversations. We bring all of it to you right in our great community of educated fans. And most importantly, you get access to our content creators.
Even better than that, everybody loves merch. You get awesome t-shirts, a cool decal, and a letter from the Cover One team signed directly to you.
All for $60. That gets you the entire season, next year's free agency and draft. $60. Click the link in the description. Cover One Insider. Become one today.
Yeah, I mean, I spent a lot more than $60 at the bar this weekend. It would have been much more well spent on a Cover One Pass if I, just didn't get one because I just happened to work here. But yeah, helping out by signing up for One Pass. It helps us kind of do what we do. It helps us keep access to a lot of the data streams that we use for our shows, for our write-ups, for everything. It's awesome to be a part of the Cover One team for me, at least, because I have access to all this stuff and I have access to all these great, smart people I work with. And if you sign up for One Pass, you'll also have access to them. And probably one of the coolest things being that Slack channel that's so unbelievably active all the time.
Yeah, the premium Slack is so much fun, man.
Yeah. Like I was saying, before we kind of sign off here, because I'm trying to get this done by 8 o'clock, I just wanted to kind of get your take here. I think we covered that Bills-Raiders game pretty well, but I want to get your take on a couple of the other teams in the AFC and some weird things I think we've seen from them. So, like, for instance, the Bengals, they're 0-2. Joe Burrow's not playing good football right now. Do you think that this is an injury plaguing Joe Burrow? Do you think Burrow's just rusty? Like, what's your level of concern with a team like the Bengals?
Tough to say.
And I'm putting you on the spot here.
It's all good. No, I had a brief discussion with a Bengals fan today in one of the spaces. Week 1, I wasn't concerned at all. I felt like they were just rusty. The Browns pass rush with Jim Schwartz coaching, excuse me. That's a stutter, is going to be very, very good, if not one of the best units in the league this year. So that game, I felt like the Bengals hung tough, but the offense just couldn't get anything going. First week of Burrow being back after getting hurt in camp. All right, that's fine. This past week, you go up against another divisional opponent and close game. Burrow played better and had some production. I think it was 230 something yards. He had 2 touchdowns and threw a pick, but he re-aggravates his calf and you lose the game. That is concerning to me. It's concerning to me because your margin for error now is significantly thinner than it was. And last year, they go into an 0-2 hole. They climb out of it, go 2-2, and eventually work their way up to, unfortunately, beat us in the playoffs and go to the AFC Championship. But if you fall to 0-3, or if Burrow has to miss the week, and then you drop to that record and it just continues, it's tough. I'm not saying they're done. I'm not saying anything hyperbolic, but they are in a rough spot right now. And I hope that Taylor and Burrow can just figure out something, because if Burrow isn't a go and they drop that game to the Rams, they're going to be in a very serious situation where they have to kind of, I would say borderline panic.
Yeah. I bring this up just because of everything we had to deal with last week, where the Bill season was over after a week 1 loss. And I just wanted to quickly kind of look at the rest of the AFC and use them as context. And that's what I did all last week and all this week. And you look at teams like the Bengals, who are 0-2. You look at the Bills, who are 1-1. The Chiefs are 1-1. The Jaguars are 1-1. All these teams that were kind of the favorites to win their respective divisions haven't got off to the best start. You see the Bills improving off of what they did in week 1. That's a great sign for Buffalo. The Chiefs went and beat the Jaguars. Granted, they scored 17 points. They're not really putting up a ton of points right now. There's a little bit of concern there, though. I think the Chiefs will be fine. You look at the Jaguars, who couldn't really do anything against the Chiefs. The Chargers are 0-2. It's just this AFC that was supposedly loaded, supposedly going to dominate, and the Bills were generally picked as the team that was going to fall off. Like, it's all bunched up right now. We're 2 weeks into the season, but it's interesting to watch all these teams kind of struggle in very different ways. The Bengals in particular is a team that I'm really interested in, because I think they're starting to be a little bit more concerned there than maybe Bengals fans want to let on. And if this Joe Burrow thing's a real thing, let's say he doesn't suit up on, I think it's next Monday night against the Rams, that team's going to be in big trouble.
Yeah, that's just not a spot you want to be in. And someone made a great point. Like, you got to think about the long-term window and the fact that you just extended Burrow. You got to treat him like your prized possession and be very careful when it comes to his injuries. But at the same time, like, the money, the Brinks truck is going to get backed up for Jamar Chase and might not be able to retain T. Higgins. And you don't know how long you have this core together. So unless you nail it in the draft, that means like you got to figure out a way to win while you have them. And that's the thing that I think Bengals fans should acknowledge is, I don't think you have to pay Chase yet, but if T. Higgins walks, like, you have to supplement that in the receiver room. And, that's just tough to do. He's a great talent. So got to find a way to pay him. And if you can't, with this injury, that just makes things a little more difficult for them to assess.
For sure. Well, I think we did pretty damn good. It's 7:56. My goal was 8 o'clock to get people ready for the Browns Steelers game, which I actually think is going to be a really good game. So I'm good wrapping here. Joe, where can the people find you? Tell them about your show. Tell them about what you're doing. Let them know.
For sure, man. So people probably just saw me 30 minutes ago. My show Under Review is usually live every Saturday at 11 a.m. right here on Cover One's YouTube channel, Facebook, and Twitch. I bring a guest on every week and we talk about what's going on in the Bills world. It's a lot of fun, a great way to kick off your weekend, especially when you got Sunday, Monday, or even Thursday football happening. So I hope you all can check me out if you haven't seen my show yet. This weekend, I obviously, because I pre-recorded, I will not be live, but next weekend I will be back with a really cool guest that I will announce eventually. But yeah, I really appreciate you having me on. It was awesome talking ball with you. And yeah, go Bills, everybody. Let's beat Washington and get to 2-1.
Yeah, man. Yeah, thank you for coming on. Like we were talking before the show, doing these things solo sucks. So having somebody here is great, and Joe's always great. Just real quick from my end, I drop a rooting interest every week on Wednesday over on our Buffalo Bills, the Buffalo Bills subreddit. Goes through every single game, every single week. It tells you who you should root for and why to support the Bills. So that comes out Wednesdays by 9. And then Fridays about 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning, I drop a matchup previews, which is just a kind of in-depth preview of who the Bills are playing that week. So that'll obviously be the Commanders this week. But other than that, if you're going to the game, hit me up on Twitter at UberHansen. Oh my God, I am not good at that. And I will see you at Commanders game. Yeah, not easy. And as always, to Bills Mafia, go Bills.
Go Bills.